Hello friends, and welcome to the February 10th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can get involved. My name is Scott Adnick, your host and Texas Impact's Outreach Director, and today's episode is being brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas. Before we launch in, I do want to remind you that Texas Impact is hosting an Interfaith Advocacy Conference next week, February 16th through 18th in Austin, so please make sure to register soon at texasimpact.org. We just came from a staff meeting where we talked about an exciting candidate forum on climate change that will be taking place as part of that, so you certainly will not want to miss that. Austin area friends, there will be a chance for you all to come just for the candidate forum part of the program. So speaking of climate change, I do want to introduce today's guest, one of our housemates here at the office, Bay Scoogin, who is the director of TexPIRG. Bay, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I mentioned climate because I know you all do a lot of work around climate issues, but we want to start out by talking about transportation, which, full disclosure, we haven't talked a lot about on Weekly Witness. So I wonder if you can talk to us about the work you're doing on transportation and what Texans of faith should know.
Be happy to, yes. And thanks so much, like I said, again, for having me on the show. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and TexPIRG, and then we'll jump into the transportation side of things. My name is Bay Scoogin. I'm the director of Texas Public Interest Research Group, or TexPIRG.
Yes.
So we were founded, as of next year will be our 50th anniversary of consumer and public interest advocacy in the state.
Are we going to have a party?
Oh yeah.
Are you going to
It's unclear if you're going to be invited,
on.
but everyone else in the office, the people here that really do the work.
Oh, come on. That hurts my soul a little bit.
But we were founded as part of the NADER Public Interest and Consumer Movement, and we've been practicing organizing and advocacy ever since. So I've been here for 3 or 4 years now. I've really been loving it. I come from an organizing background. I was in the Peace Corps in Ethiopia. I was on some political campaigns, and so I try and bring as much expertise from a bunch of different venues into advocacy. That's plenty about me and TexPIRG, right?
That's good information.
Great.
Thanks.
So transportation is now the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions in the country. It has surpassed energy consumption as our leading contributor to climate change. In addition to that, transportation also affects our public health sector. It affects our wallets, our budget. We'll talk a little bit about that. And it affects environmental and social justice issues as well. So it's affordability, even in housing, you can speak to. So it's one of the few areas where we can make progress, not only on the environment, but also on a variety of issues that we really care about. So our goal as TexPIRG is to transform the way we think about transportation, especially here in Texas, where we have car culture because of the infrastructure we've built.
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure, and talk a little bit about the electrification market, and then I want to talk a little bit about public transit. Does that sound good to you?
I think that's a perfect plan. Y'all all right with that? Cool. Thanks.
Good. We're getting a lot of buy-in from Facebook Live. Thanks for your participation. So infrastructure is probably the most important piece of it. When you build a big multi-billion-dollar piece of infrastructure, you end up using that for quite some time. So when you choose to build highways, then the only real benefit that you're going to get is more cars on the road.
Right.
So this is in transportation policy called the fundamental law of road congestion, and it's very simply put: if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
It being highways, they being cars.
Right.
So in economic terms, it would be called induced demand. So we're getting a little wonky. I don't know how interested you are in that, but essentially is when you build infrastructure for cars, you get more cars.
Right.
And right now, as the way the market is, that means that we have more internal combustion engines on the road, so more burning gas. It also increases demand for goods to be shipped along those highway channels. For example, here in Texas, the I-35 corridor ships about 10% of the nation's economic activity per year.
Wow. So
that's more than $1 trillion in economic activity comes just down through I-35 from Dallas through Austin down further south. That's unheard of. No other road in the nation is even close to that. So in addition to just trying to get to work every day, and especially those of us from Austin, know it's hard with just your car sitting on moped, sitting on 35. Okay, So infrastructure matters. The things we should be building are public transit infrastructure. So we should be building ways to move people and not move cars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really simple math. If you put the same amount of people in one bus versus all those people in a car each, you take up a significant less amount of space.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're able to ship more people with less greenhouse gas emissions, with less public health concerns, and with less space on the road. So we're actually even benefiting the infrastructure we've already built. But we have to stop building those big infrastructure projects.
Right.
So that's our first campaign.
All right.
Follow-ups on that? Should we keep going?
So, are you looking at this at a state level? Is this primarily local initiatives? What are you looking at there?
All of our work tends to be at all three levels,
Okay.
local, state, and federal. This is no different. So at the local level, we look at the projects that are in the cities that are currently have proposals. Here in Austin, for example, that's the I-35 expansion. In Houston, that's the I-45 expansion. So it's all appropriately known as the North Houston Highway Improvement Project. So those are both local but they're being done by TxDOT, so they're state. And then we're also involved in infrastructure discussions with our federal government as well.
Pretty sure the I-45 one is going right near my house right now, so we got some conversations about that off air. So if you were a person of faith in Texas who's going to meet with our legislator about transportation issues right now, what would your talking point be?
You would say we need to fund public transit. It's as simple as that. Yeah, I mean, we could get into some specific bills or specific policies, but literally all you got to say is Texas gives basically no money to public transit.
Mm-hmm.
For comparison, we give the same amount as states like Wyoming and North Dakota, and that's not per capita, that's total.
We're bigger than those two states. I don't know if you've...
Some people would say, yeah, I think. And there's more people here,
Yeah.
and there's a bigger economy here.
Right.
So that's not good.
So bigger investment, local, state, federal level for public transit.
Yes, or even from the state, any investment in public transit.
Fair enough.
We've got some political realities here in the state that make that difficult. Most notably a constitutional requirement that all the money from gas taxes goes to highway building. So we're trying to get around that, but essentially if we could just keep beating the drum that people want public transit, we'll get there eventually.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, electrification.
Okay. So the other way to reduce our pollution, reduce our affordability crisis in cities, to increase justice in transportation is to electrify. There's a variety of reasons for this. Obviously, the greenhouse gas emissions case is pretty clear. You're no longer emitting tailpipe emissions. Simple as that. But also, let me ask you a question, a quiz. What do you think the average cost of car ownership is in the state of Texas? How much does it cost per year, total cost of ownership, to own a car? From the payment on the car, to gas, to maintenance, to all the things.
$10,000.
That's very close. It's $12,500.
All right.
So that's the average cost of per car ownership for the state. Now imagine if your family is in the lower income bracket. That's a significant portion of your budget.
Yeah, almost what a minimum wage employee would make for a year.
Almost the entire wage. That's exactly right. And so we see this economically, that the lower the income decile, among the 10%, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, the further down you go, the higher percentage transit and transportation comes as part of your budget cost. Makes perfect sense.
Right.
But if we want to solve an affordability crisis like we have here in Austin, which is driving gentrification, displacement, it's also actually driving greenhouse gas issues by developing out as opposed to up. We can talk about that if you want. But point being that if we can electrify, we can lower the cost of car ownership right now, totally available to do, with and get fewer vehicle miles traveled by gas engines.
So what's the policy look like on that?
So we've got to do a couple things. We're advocating for transit agencies to electrify their buses.
Okay.
We're also advocating for some pretty wonky, nitty, specific stuff to encourage electric vehicle adoption on the consumer side.
Right.
So we don't really need to get into that. We don't need help on the organizing side. It's a rulemaking process right now where we're essentially trying to figure out, is an electric vehicle charging station, is that a gas station? Is it an outlet? Is it some other piece of public infrastructure that we don't have rules for? So maybe wonky stuff but the point is like the market's going to change to electric vehicles, and we're just trying to kind of make sure we're ready for that more than anything.
Yeah, so this is less of there's certainly some policy ramifications here, but it's more a consumer choice thing that maybe we're going to.
Right, and so the real thing is just be educated, and especially next time people are looking at buying a car, look into some electric options, because you would be surprised at the savings you can have, not only for your budget, but also for the environment.
All right. So that's 2. What's number 3?
Number 3 we touched on already a little bit because it goes hand in hand with infrastructure, and that's public transit.
Okay.
So I would hope that in addition to talking to your legislators about supporting public transit from the state perspective, that you would vote positively for any public transit proposals. Houston just passed one. They passed $3.5 billion bond, essentially, to build more light rail and bus rapid transit. That's excellent news. Austin looks like it's going to have something on the ballot to vote for in November, and San Antonio looks like it's going to have something on the ballot. Those 2, we have ideas about what the transit might look like, but not what the thing on the ballot might look like. So way far in advance, I hope that you will remember that public transit good, and you should vote for those 2 things in the affirmative.
Okay. So you recently spoke at our United Methodist Women's Legislative event, excuse me, and were well received. And one of the things you talked about was the importance of political participation. And full disclosure, I wasn't in the room when you were having that conversation, so maybe just for me, what did you talk about that day?
Well, it was perfectly delivered,
sure.
And excellent content, so it's really sad you missed it.
Well, that's why I invited you to come on here, so I can do a recap.
Excellent. I hope I can do it justice. Politics is about power, and anybody who tells you differently doesn't know what politics is about. There's been a lot of good coverage from James Carville recently talking about this on the rant that went viral. Dave Roberts on Vox talks about this a lot, that we need to remember that politics is about building power. And both those words somehow have gotten kind of dirty, like politics. Like, I don't want to get involved in politics. Or like, ooh, the rich and powerful. So there's something about them that's like, that we kind of shy away from. But we need to lean into them more. Politics is very simply about having the power to make the change that you want to see in the world. And so the very first thing that people can do to accomplish that is vote. The next thing they can do is get people to vote. So let's talk about those 2 things fundamentally. I am certain that if you are listening to this podcast, you are a high likelihood voter.
You better be.
right.
We're going to have to check.
Go vote. But the next step is getting other people to vote. And here's how you do that. You've got to make a list of 10 people that you're very close to, or relatively close to, and you think may or may not be voting. Don't worry about their party, don't worry about who they're voting for. The only thing your goal is increased participation. This isn't a partisan endeavor. And you have got to talk to each one of those 10 people 10 times. So to be 100% sure, 10 people, 10 times. 10 times 10 equals 100% sure that you're going to get new votes.
All right. So we just talked to the United Methodist Women a couple of weeks ago, and one of the ideas from one of the groups that came out of that was that they were going to phone bank all of the members of their United Methodist Women's group, just to make sure that they all voted, right? Like nonpartisan, not pushing a candidate, but just calling to make sure they all voted. Another group, spoiler alert, like I know this group, had breakfast tacos one day before they all went and voted together, right? To make sure that everybody's engaged. Do you have kind of some suggestions or ideas for how groups could be successful at making those contacts and organizing people to go vote together?
Absolutely, and those are great things to hear. That's exactly what I would want to see and what TexPIRG would want to see. It's clear, the social science is clear, that organizing people you know is what works.
Right.
Political campaigns are going to be knocking on doors. They're going to knock on millions of doors. They're going to make tens of millions of phone calls, trying to get people to vote. And those have some effect, definitely, especially at that scale. But the efficacy of person-to-person, peer-to-peer organizing, like you're talking about, and I'll get to your specific question, is what's effective. So the science is saying it's 3 to 5 times more effective. So whereas in the political campaigns that I worked on, we might say you have to talk to somebody 15 to 25 times. Most of the time in peer-to-peer organizing or as a group, for example, you're going to be successful just talking to them about 5 times.
Okay.
Which is why we say 10 by 10, because if you do that, you're going to be 100% sure.
Right.
So what can you do? Anything social like you're talking about is fantastic. Anything where you're calling people you already know or have some connection to is fantastic. I would also encourage, especially if you're talking to perhaps some of your younger friends, those seem to go well and aren't totally. Texting hasn't been taken over by political organizing yet, and so it still feels kind of genuine. But that's really it.
Okay.
Building political power is really much simpler than we think it is. It's just getting people to do more things. And the more people you can get to do things, the more people you can get to do things. I hate to be kind of circular about it, but that's the way political power works.
Right. So we're voting this year.
Yeah.
We're talking to our legislators about public transportation.
Yeah.
Anything else that you wish people would be doing during this important year?
So in terms of getting active and engaged, there's really only 3 categories of things you can do. And actually, B told me that this is a way that y'all in the faith community have looked at this. So I'm thrilled that there's so much synergy here.
I'm going to make sure you say it right, so you're now being judged.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. What a generous host we have today.
Yes.
You can give your time, you can give your talent, and you can give your treasure. That's all you can do. It's all you can do to volunteer, make the world a better place, or if you want to use my language, build political power. You can give your time, you can volunteer, knock on doors, make phone calls, do a social group, make a discussion group, text your grandparents, your grandkids. You can give your talent if you've got some skill, graphic design, being on Facebook, which is, if that's the only thing you do, you're not doing enough.
Right.
But it's one thing you can do. Writing LTEs.
Letters to the editor.
Sorry, thank you. Yep. And then treasure. Nonprofits and political campaigns need money. And it's, I bemoan and am so tired of the power and influence of money that we have in our politics. And to change that thing, we're going to have more political power, which means we need more money.
Right.
So.
Cool. Well, that money conversation might lead right into the next question. Anything you'd like to shamelessly plug today, or any way that people can get involved or keep up with your work?
Well, if people wanted to give money, you did say
I
shameless plug.
I didn't know if you were segueing into that.
I would encourage people to follow us online at TexPIRG for both Facebook and Twitter. That helps us get the word out. That helps us market our organization and build power digitally, which is important. We would love if people could give some donations to us. We're a small budget nonprofit and we're working for everybody in the state. And sometimes because we're not working for a specific interest group, we don't get as much support, right? Because it matters less to the entire state as to one small specific group of people. Not that what y'all are doing is like bad or easy.
We'll have a conversation about that later.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll earn whatever dig I get. But yeah, we could definitely use the funding, and we're always looking to meet with people. Telling your story is a surprisingly powerful tactic and experience. So if you've got a story as a consumer, or as it relates to the public interest or public transit, come talk to me. I would love to figure out a way that we can share that story with the broader public to market that issue and to push the narrative that we should all be doing a little bit for the public interest.
All right. Bay, really appreciate the time. Anything you'd like to leave us with today?
Nope, but thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. And again, we share office space here, so I see you in the hallway often, and it's our first time to have you on Weekly Witness. We'll definitely have to have you back. So
appreciate it.
So thanks again. Friends, this is going to be a busy year, and I will echo the challenge that we have work to do by putting our time, treasure, and talents to good work this year. If you are doing things in your community that you'd like to share, please let me know. We'll amplify the work you're doing and give that out as an example for others. You can email me at scott@texasimpact.org or use the hashtag weeklywitness. Hope you'll share this content with your friends, with your congregations, because we do have work to do in 2020. If you've made it this far in the podcast, hopefully you appreciate the work of Texas Impact. You'll want to make sure you're a member by going to texasimpact.org/join. Next week we'll have some pre-recorded content for you, since we will be in the midst of a candidate forum at our normal time and place. So check out the podcast feed for that information, and we'll look forward to seeing you again live the following week. Until then, friends, let's get to work.